Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a spin through the biggest headlines in the sport. This week, I am joined by Goze in Las Vegas, Nolan King up in Boston, and Danny Segura down in Miami. So let's get things started. Guys, Jake Paul versus Tyron Woodley was a thing that actually happened. It was certainly a spectacle, and it did have big fight feels. There's no question about it. But, I don't know, the action kind of failed to deliver much in terms of real entertainment value. So with the event in the rearview mirror, tell me, is there room for this sort of thing on the combat sports landscape? Do we want to see more of it? Or are we better off getting rid of this just as soon as humanly possible? Let's put 4 minutes on the clock. Go, get it started.
I think there's definitely room for this. I'm just not so sure there's enough characters to carry this out. That's what makes Jake and Logan Paul so unique in that aspect. John, you and I, we grew up in an era where there was celebrity boxing. You remember Manute Bull fighting the Fridge, Screech beating up on an old man. I mean, it's been done before, but it's failed. These guys have something rare that keeps carrying it on. And I think what it is instead of challenging YouTubers and maybe even other athletes, they've actually had the balls to go in there against combat sports athlete. I think that's the hook for them, guys. I think that's what keeps our attention. 2 years ago, I probably would have told you anyone in the UFC has that striking ability to put these guys out, but it just hasn't happened. So what they're doing now with their trash talking, bringing in some of these big names, it's making it so that you have to watch the fight. Otherwise, you're going to have nothing to talk about come Monday morning. At the water cooler, nobody's talking about The Walking Dead or any of these shows right now. They're all talking about this fight. It was all over your social media. There's no way around it. And then the last purpose that it's serving is it's actually doing something for fighter pay. I think it's putting some eyes on there. So right now, I definitely think there's room for it, and I think it's going to keep going.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, right? Like when they were fighting under the Triller Fight Club banner, I was like, man, this feels like a circus. And then last night, it felt like more like a normal broadcast, but that felt like it fell a little bit flat for some reason. It's like I almost missed the circus a little bit. So I don't know. Nolan, what do you think? Do we need more of this? Do we need to change it? What are we doing here?
No, I think we're on the right track. I mean, think of all the things that we have in combat sports today. I don't think that it's necessarily like you have to meet a certain amount of requirements to partake. I mean, we have videos come out of Russia of 600-pound fat guys fighting 125-pound females. We have all sorts of night fights and 3-on-2, MMA fights overseas, stuff like that. So I don't think there should really be like a threshold, so to speak, of what, who am I to say what is and isn't allowed in combat sports? And look at the proof is in the pudding with the Jake Paul experiment. The guy brings in eyeballs. He brings in an audience of people that would not otherwise watch boxing or combat sports, which is phenomenal. It's growing the sport. Like Goze said, he's bringing up issues like fighter pay. He's giving, legitimate boxers like Amanda Serrano platforms perhaps that they have not had before. So I honestly think, I kind of open it with welcome arms. I welcome it with open arms, excuse me. I had, a bunch of friends last night interested in this fight. They wouldn't watch a normal boxing fight. They wouldn't watch, Amanda Serrano fight, but they would watch Jake Paul and Tyron Woodley. So I think it's a good addition to the combat sports world. I think last night, like John said, it had that feel like a legitimate boxing. The entrances were on point. The production was on point. So I enjoyed it. I mean, it wasn't the best fight in the world, but I'm certainly not opposed to more. Bring it on.
Yeah, I guess sometimes fights are just going to fall flat, right? That's just going to happen. And, hey, man, Sunday nights, I'm all for that. Give me something else. It's not competing with anything else I was watching. So, Danny, you've seen this stuff up close. More of it, less of it, change it? What are we doing?
I think the way it is, it's fine. We're not getting a Jake Paul fight every single weekend, but every now and then it's fine, especially if the right opponent is available. And look, does it have room? 100%. I mean, it was by far the biggest combat sports event of the weekend. And keep in mind, they were going up against the UFC and PFL, two of the biggest organizations in mixed martial arts. Also, let's not forget the people who were tuning in. I mean, you had Dave Chappelle in the crowd, Conor McGregor, Nate Diaz, two of the biggest stars in mixed martial arts, were tweeting about it. I mean, Masvidal was also involved in the storyline. I mean, this is huge right now for combat sports. And look, Jake Paul keeps getting better. Say what you want about the guy, but he's taking this seriously. And as long as he takes this seriously and keeps winning, there's always going to be room for these type of fights.
Yeah, I guess as far as it goes moving forward, it kind of goes back to what you said, Goze. It's just, can you get the right characters? Can you get the right opponents? And if you do, why not, right? I mean, it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but I'm well beyond that concern. Does this look bad for the sport or whatever? No, it doesn't look bad for the sport. It's prize fighting. We fight in cages and rings. It already looks bad enough. You can't mess it up. So I agree. More of it. We just got to get the right characters. We'll see how it plays out. speaking of finding the right characters, I mean, the type of money this thing is generating, you got to believe we're going to see at least one more Jake Paul fight moving forward. So tell me, if we're going to do this, if we're going to keep going with Jake Paul, who should he fight next? Who is the right next character for him to face in the ring to keep people excited and entertained and interested in this stuff? 4 minutes on the clock. Nolan, what do you think?
This is going to be the most unpopular opinion on this show, but the ball is in Jake Paul's court. I mean, he ultimately is the one that gets to decide who he faces next. Let's face it, he's behind the control panel. He's the puppet master right now. And I think for him, he still has a lot of improvement to do. Sure, he went out there. He didn't struggle with Tyron Woodley. But I mean, watching him last night, watching him move and seeing him for 8 rounds, he still has a lot of work to do if he wants to get in there with somebody that has, mediocre boxing experience. So for me, I think that the Dylan Dennis fight is still there. Dylan's obviously in Bellator. They can use him, the crossover sort of promotion there. I know a lot of people don't like him. I know a lot of people think he's all talk. And right now, Dylan has been all talk. But I think an opportunity like this would be not only for, enough for Dylan to come back, but it would also be beneficial for Jake Paul. And sure, you might be asking, why would I give Jake Paul, the guy with like the least amount of boxing experience out of the MMA guys that he's, or at least amount of striking experience out of the MMA guys that he's fought? And that's simply because I think that Jake Paul has something to gain here, which is a Conor McGregor fight down the line. I mean, there's a little bit of a tie-in. He goes out there and beats McGregor's friends. Now he's got a little bit of leverage in terms of trying to promote or trying to give McGregor a reason to step in there. So sure, I know I'm going to take some hate for this, but I'm living in a realistic world, and I think that that's something that we might see next.
I kind of like it, man. You lay out the long-term scenario, and you do have the Showtime crossover, right? So that it's a natural fit. And for Jake Paul, it might be the first time he's ever the good guy, man. People might actually be cheering for him in that. Danny, what do you think? You got any ideas for a different opponent?
Look, I think he should be missed a little bit, right? Let the fans miss him a little bit. So go get that haircut, go get his nose fixed, get the teeth fixed, and just sort of relax, get that vacation that you said you wanted to get, and then just reassess then. We got a big fight coming up under the Triller banner on September 11th, where there's some interesting names there in the boxing world. So we got Tito Ortiz fighting Anderson Silva. We got Oscar De La Hoya fighting Vitor Belfort. So just see what happens between those four. See who looks best. See who makes sense after the event, and maybe build something up there. But what I do not want to see is a rematch with Tyron Woodley. You already have a win over a former UFC champion. There's nothing else to gain there. So reassess in a few months, take a little bit of a break, and get a fresh new face in there.
Yeah, always leave him wanting a little bit more, right? I agree with you. I'm not looking for the rematch at all. I'm sorry, Tyron, but just you had your opportunity. It didn't pay off. I'm not interested in that. I want to see something different. Goze, what about you? You're always a little creative matchmaker. What do you see next for Jake Paul?
Well, I'm going to give you the answer as if I were in charge of Jake Paul's career. If I were protecting his career, I agree with Danny. No Tyron Woodley. There is nothing to gain there. If Tyron had more to give, he should have given it Sunday night, right? So we've already been there. We've done that. Plus, you got to remember, like a guy like Jake Paul, he's in his 20s. If you do want to do any type of rematch, man, let these older cats sit on the bench for a while before you get to that. That's further down the road. I would take a rest for a little bit, but when it's time to get back in there, I think you maybe need to take a look at somebody in the NFL, somebody like that, or pro wrestling. Let's get that big group of fans involved. If it wasn't for CM Punk recently making his way there to AEW, I would say a guy like that is something that I would look at. If you want to continue with the mixed martial arts road, then I know he's probably on a beach somewhere drinking Mai Tais or something, but I would knock on Artem Lobov's door. I would try and bring him back because, as Nolan said, there's a little bit of a tie there to a guy named Conor McGregor who further down the road, eventually, maybe you can get a fight with, and I think that's a step towards that. We already saw Artem go in and fight Paulie Malignaggi, right, in boxing. Let's see him do it here.
It almost feels crazy that we're mentioning Conor McGregor's name involved in any of this, right? But with the type of interest and money and everything it generates, you'd be lying if you said there wasn't a possibility of it happening somewhere down the road. So I like what you're saying, and it might not be a bad idea to go outside the MMA space a little bit and find something new. So, man, I'll give it to these Paul brothers. Whether you like it or not, man, they get the marketing aspect of it. They figure it out, so they're going to find somebody, man. I'll be interested to see what they do. Guys, also this past week, he didn't get quite the media love, but UFC on ESPN 30 saw Giga Chikadze earn an impressive win over Edson Barbosa. Now he wants to serve as either a backup fighter for the upcoming title fight between Alexander Volkanovski and Brian Ortega, or book a fight with Max Holloway. Now, those were things that he mentioned. Which of those would you recommend, Or do you see something else that maybe he's not seeing right now that might be a better career path for him? We'll put 4 minutes on the clock. Dan, you get us started on this one.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I know Giga really wants to be a backup fighter for that title fight between champion Alexander Volkanovski and Brian Ortega. But look, I really do feel like Giga has the potential here to become a champion. And I don't like seeing kind of that late replacement slot because, if it does happen, you do not know who you're fighting. You could be fighting Ortega or Volkanovski on short notice, and there's, they're very different styles, so it's hard to prepare. And I really do think he has the potential to hold the belt at some point in time. So I wouldn't want bad preparation or not enough preparation to be the reason why maybe he doesn't reach his full potential. So for me, sit back, let those two figure out what they're going to do. He's got plenty of time in the game, and go fight the former champion, Max Holloway. Become undeniable at that time. He gets in this run where he wants to prove he's the best striker in the UFC at 145 pounds. And look, he's making a great claim by defeating Mr. Edson Barbosa there. But we all know that Max Holloway is a self-proclaimed, and a lot of people also agree, the best boxer in the UFC. If you beat him, I think you undoubtedly become the best striker in MMA. So look, go down that road. It'd be a huge fight, and it'll obviously set him up for a big title fight for the winner between Volkanovski and Brian Ortega. So chill out, Giga. Go fight Holloway.
I like it. Yeah, that's the funny thing that people don't bring up sometimes with that backup situation is you essentially got to prepare for 2 different opponents, right? And how can you do that fully, especially at the highest level? So I always think that's a weird position to be in. Goze, what do you think? What's the right move here for Giga?
I think anytime you can have that insurance policy, I'm all for it. So long as the fighter knows as soon as his fight's over that he's going to be put into that situation, because what fighters do is they tend to balloon up in weight after their fight. And we all know you only have so many of these weight cuts per year. And I'd hate to see a future matchup us lose out on it because a fighter doesn't want to undergo another weight cut that year. So as long as it's not interfering with that and they know right away, I'm okay with it. As far as asking for Max Holloway, I mean, Giga's looked great, but careful what you wish for. There's not a lot of people that ask for Max Holloway, and there's a reason for that. Can you imagine fighting Max Holloway and you don't get a belt afterwards when you win? That is insanity to me. So you got to look at this last fight. Giga looked great, but it wasn't a blowout. Edson Barbosa had his moments as well. So I think one more fight in there, a good name. I think it's a win-win situation for the UFC, maybe a Calvin Kattar. If he beats Calvin Kattar, he's right there. If Calvin Kattar wins, he's right back in the mix. So I think as long as Giga keeps winning, he's going to get that title shot. Like Danny said, he's very, very impressive. I just don't know that it happens in 2021.
That's a fun suggestion. Stylistically, Calvin Kattar would obviously be a great fight as well. And you're right, man. Face Max Holloway and not be for a title, that is risky. Nolan, I don't know. Did Goze steal your answer right there? Do you know anybody outside the New England cartel that might be a good matchup?
Yeah, I think there's a few options. I'm not sure. Giga obviously put on a great performance on Saturday night, but I think we need to pump the brakes a little bit here. I think that, like Danny said, I'm not sure he is quite there for a backup for a replacement matchup, a replacement fighter for the matchup between Brian Ortega and Alexander Volkanovski. And I mean, Max Holloway right now is still aligned with Yair Rodriguez for a target date of November. So I don't necessarily think that makes sense for Max to maybe take that Giga afterwards or something. But Yair's struggled to get in the cage, man. So, I mean, Giga should stay ready. Perhaps he's talked himself into an opportunity should Yair go down. But for me, say that Max versus Yair happens, I think Giga should fight another contender, somebody with a little bit more momentum, like a Josh Emmett, like a Calvin Kattar, like Goze said, somebody kind of in that realm. Even Korean Zombie, I know, I think would be a good fight. So somebody in there. I don't think he's ready for a title shot or that conversation, but he's certainly on the trajectory with how much he's improved fight again.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of good names there. Chan Sung Jung, like you said, Korean Zombie, man. I think that's another one that fits right in the mix, that definition of being right up there at the top of the division and would still be stylistically fun. The other thing, too, is, you said it's still targeted to be Max Holloway and Yair Rodriguez, but we haven't heard of that thing booked yet, and we're already getting some December fights. So maybe something happens to one of those guys, you could jump in there. Max Holloway's a tough one, but Yair Rodriguez wouldn't be a terrible matchup for you either. And he even kind of threw some shade at him the other day. He's like, why is this guy in the top 5? He hasn't fought in 2 years. So I think there's a little history between them as well. So we'll see. Whatever's next, it's going to be a big fight for Giga Chikadze, that's for sure. Guys, also at ESPN 30, we saw the final fights of the Ultimate Fighter 29, crowning 2 new Ultimate Fighters. With this season in the book, let's put a bow on it. What impression are you walking away with after the season? And what do you think of the idea that the show is, according to UFC President Dana White, never, ever, ever going away. At least it's not as long as he's there. Let's put 4 minutes on the clock. Goze, give us your impressions.
I really liked it, guys. I mean, I might even say I loved it. For me, every season of The Ultimate Fighter was about the coaches and the heat that they bring in, seeing them engage that whole season. But this season didn't really have that coming in. It was more until after episode 4 when the coaches actually started to go at each other a little bit. So for me, the star of this season was the roster. I think every fight was pretty damn good. And I can't remember a bad fight. And you had these backstories for these fighters that helped you be more vested in every participant. The only thing I can maybe nitpick on was the coach's challenge. It was a little, for being gone that long to come back and play cornhole. I don't know about that, but I think the season did its job. It put spotlights on some fighters that I believe will be a part of the UFC roster for some time. And it also got that heat going between the coaches, two coaches that are kind of on the quiet side. It brought something out of them that's going to make me want to watch their fight when they actually compete. The only thing that's kind of out there is I feel like the season's not done because Trajan Gore is still out there. There's a little bit of unfinished business. So I think this is the season that will keep on giving. But let's just do this once a year. Let's keep it, but once a year, Dana.
Yeah, listen, I thought the show was actually pretty entertaining, and I don't think even if you didn't watch the show, how could you argue with those fights at the finale? I thought both the fights were a lot of fun as well. So, like you said, it served its purpose, even if maybe it's a little played out this time. Maybe a little something different in the show would have been nice. Nolan, what do you think? What was your overall impression now that it's in the books?
I was one of these people that was very on the fence when it was coming back. I'm never going to say, oh, it shouldn't come back. They should cancel it. Why is it on? I'm not going to be complaining that it exists. Like, if I don't want to watch it, I'm just not going to watch it. It doesn't bother me that it's on. I would say that the fights were better than I think the past couple seasons, the action wise. I did get lost halfway through the season with being the person to sit down and watch the pre-fight build up on each episode. I kind of would just speed through until the fight and kind of skim through it. So I guess it's really not my cup of tea. Maybe if they were to spice it up, add a new wrinkle, add a theme. I always thought the seasons where, ATT versus Black Zillions, or we're going to have every flyweight champion, regional champion in the world be in this bracket. Like those sort of things, or the comebacks, right? Those sort of themes, I think would drive my interest more. Just the regular old run-of-the-mill Ultimate Fighter thing that we've seen 29 times before with some international seasons mixed in there as well. I don't think that that's necessarily going to capture my attention beyond just checking out the fights and seeing who wins in the bracket.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I like that idea. I stand right with you. It's like, listen, I don't understand the people that say it needs to go away. You don't have to watch it all. You don't need to. But like you said, if we're going to maximize it and get our most enjoyment out of it, I do like the idea of those themes. So maybe they can tweak that a little bit. Danny, what about you? Any suggestions, any thoughts? What'd you take away from this season?
I think I'm with Nolan on this one. To be honest, I didn't really watch the show a whole lot. I would watch, some of the fights, but the actual show, it just I've seen 20 of them. I kind of stopped watching after that. I think they draw my interest once it's something special, right? Like inaugurating a new division. There's some heated rivalry between the coaches, or something really special that merits to have a Ultimate Fighter season. At this point, it's become kind of just wash and repeat. So for me. Now, Dana White says the numbers are great on ESPN. The people at ESPN love it. So, I'm not necessarily the best gauger at all times for popularity. So, look, if it's doing well for the company and their broadcasting partner's happy with it, then keep on doing it. Sure. But in my opinion, make it special. Don't just make it a routine. So, we'll see what happens with the show. It obviously still serves its purpose. We got great fights. We got 2 winners that promise to be very good fighters here in the UFC, and who knows, about their potential. So all in all, I like it, but I would like for them to make it a little bit more special rather than just year after year.
Yeah, I think that's what we have to accept, right? The show's not really for us hardcores, you know what I mean? It's more for casuals. But as I said, it gave us some fighters that I definitely want to keep an eye on. I mean, Ricky Tercios, come on, man. How do you not want as much of that guy as you can get? There were some excellent performances on the show. And I guess we should say, by the way, let's remember, those weren't their first choice for the coaches. There were some pretty spicy little matchups that they tried to get in there that may have made it a little bit more exciting. So we'll see what they do. As you said, once a year goes, we'll see what they do in 2022. Well, guys, this week, the biggest fight on the agenda is Derek Brunson versus Darren Till, and it's a big one in the UFC's middleweight division, but 185 pounds is in a little bit of a holding pattern right now as we kind of wait on Israel Adesanya versus Robert Whittaker 2 to play out. We don't even have it on the books yet. We don't even know if it's going to happen this year. So, I mean, what's actually at stake in this contest? It's a big fight, but is there an immediate impact in the result of this? Let's put 4 minutes on the clock. Nolan, tell us what's at stake.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because I think we all look at this and say, hey, these guys are two contenders and they're talented and they're right at the top of the division. But I'm not really sure in terms of like taking a big leap forward if this is going to do much for either one of them. Brunson's rolling a little bit more than Till, who's been inconsistent. So I guess for me, the way that I would label this is like a title eliminator. It's like, getting a guy that's 2 wins away from a title shot, right? That's essentially what's happening here. These two guys, I think whoever wins this will be slotted kind of in a number one contender fight situation, whether that's against Jared Cannonier or somebody else in the division, maybe the winner of Paulo Costa versus Marvin Vettori. But right now with Israel Adesanya and Robert Whittaker kind of on a delay, I think it makes the division's movement kind of stalled. And I don't necessarily think that either one of these guys is going to go out there and, steal the next title fight with the win. So I think it's a safe bet. This fight will get the winner into a title eliminator scenario, and then we'll take it from there once Izzy versus Robert Whittaker 2 plays out.
The old coveted number 2 contender fight, I guess is what we're doing here. What do you think, Danny? I mean, do you see things at stake? I don't know if it's going to make an immediate impact in the title picture. Surely it'll move some people up and down the division, but what do you see as the stakes of this matchup on Saturday?
Yeah, maybe not an overall picture. I don't think there's a lot on the line for the reasons that Nolan mentioned. But if we zoom in, I do think there's a lot at stake for an individual fighter, and that's Derek Brunson. Look, Darren Till's a fan favorite. The champion likes Darren Till. I think we can all agree that that's a fantastic matchup, and he's only 28. So even if he loses this one, there's plenty of time for him to get on a 2-3 fight winning streak, and that should be enough for him to get a title shot. But with Derek Brunson, he's 37 years old. He's undergone through a crazy reinvention where we've seen a new version of him. 4-fight winning streak, but I don't know if we can see a third chapter. I think this is the latest chapter. So the last chapter. So it's either, he continues and becomes a title contender here and goes on to fight for the belt, or he doesn't. So I really do think there's a lot at stake for Derek Brunson. I think his hope, his dreams to one day fight for the belt are all on the line here. I have a hard time imagining if he loses to Darren Till here that he's going to somehow reinvent himself a third time, build on another win streak at 37, and then fight the champion again, who he already lost to. So a lot on the line here for Derek Brunson. And we'll see if he comes out on top, and makes it 5-0.
It's a great point, right? Like maybe it's not the immediate title shot, but for Derek Brunson, maybe it is kind of make or break because you don't have a lot of time to, as you said, reinvent yourself for another time. Goze, what about you? What do you see as the stakes here?
I think there is a giant holding pattern here, guys. I mean, I think there's more at stake for Derek Brunson, but all the eggs are in one basket. It's in the championship fight. Anytime there's a 2 at the end of the name on the poster, there's the opportunity that these guys could split. And if they do that, these aren't the type of guys that fight that often. We might be waiting a long time before either one of these guys get a shot at that title shot. So you got to hope that we don't get stuck in that situation. If Israel Adesanya takes care of business the second time around, then yeah, they're in decent spots. Brunson is in a better one, but if you look at Brunson's streak, he's got some decent wins, but there's not really killers in there. What he needs to do is go out there. It's all about performance, what they do. Have a great performance, have people foaming at the mouth. They can't wait to see him again. Pick up that mic and say something crazy. I think he has to do something like that. With Darren Till, he's always going to be, I think, a step behind there because he just hasn't really been performing as of late. So he does have a couple things going for him. And I think, A, he's pretty easy to promote. And B, it would be a fresh matchup for the champion should Israel Adesanya retain his championship. But Jared Cannonier is waiting too.
Jared Cannonier is definitely out there. You're right. I think this is a big moment for Darren Till as well, right? I mean, you said marketability. He's still a very young guy, but you do got to get results as well, right? I mean, you got to pick up wins at some point or the UFC just can't continue to back you. So it's an intriguing matchup to say the least. Like I said, maybe not an exact number one contender coming out of this, but I think there are some real stakes in this fight, and I'm looking forward to it. Guys, we got the return of Contender Series this week. One Championship is back in action. We got that Brunson versus Till matchup and a full card over there at the UFC. There certainly will be a lot happening, and we'll talk about it all next week on Spinning Back Clique.